The stars had always felt like home to Elias, a young warrior from Earth, stationed on the flagship of the human fleet, Defender. As Earth's peacekeepers, the humans had been at the forefront of maintaining harmony in the galaxy. For years they had fought to avoid war, standing as a symbol of strength, unity, and hope among the stars. But even the strongest alliances could be tested, and today would be one of those days. It was a bright morning in space, a perfect silence broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. Elias was preparing for a routine sparring session when word came through the comm system. A high-ranking alien princess had arrived aboard the Defender. Princess Kylara, heir to the Varian Empire, had come with her retinue for a diplomatic mission. She was a striking figure, known throughout the galaxy for her beauty, intellect, and fierce reputation as a leader. This was not just a simple visit. There were rumors that the princess had her own agenda, a political maneuver that could shake the foundation of the delicate peace between Earth and the Varians. Elias did not expect his morning to unfold as it did. He had heard of Kylara's reputation, but never imagined she would be so close, standing on the same deck as him. She had traveled in a ship that shone like silver in the light of distant stars, bringing with her an entourage of soldiers and diplomats. Yet it wasn't her beauty that caught Elias's eye. It was the fierce presence she carried with her, as if the entire universe bent under her command. The captain, a seasoned officer named Nolan, had arranged for a welcoming ceremony. But Elias, lost in his own thoughts, was more concerned with preparing for his sparring match. His fellow warriors, his friends, were eager to see him take part in the upcoming tournament. But today, it seemed, would be different. As Elias prepared for the fight, a sudden interruption came through the loudspeakers. "Warrior Elias," Captain Nolan's voice echoed throughout the ship. "The princess has requested to watch your skills in action. Prepare yourself." A chill ran down Elias's spine. The princess wanted to see him fight. He had only heard whispers of her interest in human strength, but to have it directed at him was an entirely different matter. This wasn't just another match, it was a moment of potential destiny. With quick determination, Elias suited up, adjusting his armor, and stepped into the arena. The arena was vast, a circular space within the Defender's training deck. The floors were designed for combat simulations, but today it was real. His opponent was a fellow warrior, a large and skilled fighter named Zoran, who had faced many opponents before. Zoran was known for his brute strength, but Elias had always been faster, more agile. As they faced each other, Elias could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. He wasn't just fighting for victory, he was fighting for something bigger. The crowd of soldiers and officers gathered around the edges of the arena, and in the VIP section sat Princess Kylara. Her eyes locked on Elias. Her gaze was cold, calculating. Yet there was an unspoken expectation in her expression. Elias could feel her attention on him, and it only added to the pressure. The bell rang, signaling the start of the match. Zoran lunged first, his massive frame charging toward Elias with the speed of a freight train. But Elias was ready. With a quick roll, he dodged Zoran's strike, and before his opponent could react, Elias was already behind him, delivering a swift kick to his back. The crowd murmured in surprise, impressed by Elias's agility. He was swift, and he used his speed to outmaneuver Zoran's brute strength. Zoran roared in frustration and swung again. But Elias was already 3 steps ahead, ducking and weaving with perfect precision. He knew this fight was a test not just of strength but of skill and intellect. Every move he made, every counterattack was measured. The crowd watched in awe as Elias expertly avoided Zoran's blows, landing several precise strikes to his opponent's pressure points. Finally, Elias saw his opening. Zoran, tired from the relentless dodging, made one last desperate charge. This time, Elias didn't back away. With a swift leap, he sidestepped Zoran's massive fist and, in one fluid motion, brought his leg up to lock Zoran's arms, forcing him to the ground. Zoran was defeated, lying breathless on the floor. The crowd erupted into applause, but Elias didn't celebrate. He stood tall, his breath steady as he turned to the princess. Kylara's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, interest, perhaps even admiration, crossing her face. It was fleeting, but Elias saw it. Kylara stood, her eyes still fixed on Elias. She wasn't clapping like the rest of the audience, but her gaze was intense. She walked down from her balcony with the grace of a predator, her guards following silently behind her. Without a word, Kylara stopped in front of Elias. Her eyes met his, and for a moment everything around them seemed to fade. She raised a single finger and pointed directly at him. The silence was deafening. "He will be mine." The words hung in the air like a declaration, and Elias felt the weight of them. The crowd fell silent, and even Zoran, still catching his breath, looked up in shock. The princess's voice was calm, yet carried an undeniable command. She had chosen him. For a moment, Elias didn't know how to respond. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. He was a warrior, trained for battle, but now he had become a symbol, a pawn in a much larger game. And for some reason, Princess Kylara had chosen him. Her gaze softened slightly, and she turned without another word, signaling her retinue to follow her. The soldiers parted as she walked, but Elias could not look away. He was left standing in the middle of the arena, surrounded by a stunned crowd and a future that suddenly felt uncertain. Elias was no fool. He knew what this meant. Kylara's words were not just an invitation. They were a challenge. His path would now intertwine with hers, whether he was ready or not. The princess had seen something in him, something beyond his strength or skill. What she wanted, Elias couldn't yet understand, but he would have to figure it out fast. In a galaxy of alliances, politics, and intrigue, the fate of two worlds might rest on the choices they made next, and so, as the echoes of the crowd's applause faded away, Elias found himself facing a future far different from the one he had imagined. He had caught the attention of the most powerful woman in the galaxy, and whether he was ready or not, he was about to be swept into a war far greater than anything he had ever known. The news of Elias's victory spread like wildfire across the fleet. The soldiers spoke in hushed tones. The diplomats debated in corners, and even Captain Nolan seemed uncertain. The young human warrior had defeated a Varian elite fighter, and in doing so had earned the unwanted attention of Princess Kylara. The princess's words, "He will be mine," still echoed in Elias's mind. As the days passed, Elias found himself unable to shake the weight of those words. He had no idea why Kylara had chosen him. Was it his skill in combat? His quick thinking? Or something else entirely? Whatever the reason, he knew one thing for certain. His life was about to change forever. It was on the third day after the match that Elias received an official summons. Princess Kylara, it seemed, was not one for wasting time. The message came through on the encrypted communication channels, clear and direct. "Prepare yourself, warrior Elias. The trials begin tomorrow. Your place in my future is already decided. There is no turning back, the trials." Elias had heard whispers about them from the older soldiers, stories of brutal challenges that tested every part of a warrior: strength, intellect, and resolve. Many had failed these tests over the centuries, and those who did were never seen again. He could only imagine what lay in store for him. The next morning, as dawn broke over the distant planetscape, Elias found himself standing before Princess Kylara's flagship, the Tyrant's Grace, a ship of legend among the Varians. Its sleek black exterior reflected the cold light of the stars. Elias's heart beat faster as he boarded the ship, flanked by the princess's guards. The Varians were an ancient race, their technology far ahead of anything humanity had ever developed. The trials would take place on a distant moon, one known only to the royal family. Once aboard, Kylara met him in the ship's main hall. She wore a gown of dark silver, embroidered with ancient symbols that shimmered as she moved. Her presence was imposing, and yet there was something more. Something Elias couldn't quite grasp. He stood tall, his posture straight, but inside his thoughts raced. "You are ready?" Kylara's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that sent a chill down Elias's spine. "I am ready," Elias replied, his voice steady though his heart was pounding. "Good. The trials will test more than your strength. They will test your mind and your will. Only the worthy will survive," Kylara said. "You must succeed, not just for me, but for your people." Elias nodded. "I understand." Kylara turned, leading him down a long corridor. She spoke as they walked, her voice echoing softly in the quiet halls. "The trials are ancient, designed by my ancestors to determine the worthiness of a leader. In the past, only the strongest and smartest have emerged victorious. But you are not just any warrior. You have something that intrigues me, Elias, something your people may not even realize yet." Elias remained silent, unsure of what to say. She had always been enigmatic, and now more than ever he felt the distance between them. Soon they arrived at a large bay, where a sleek shuttle awaited them. The craft was built for speed and efficiency, designed to reach distant planets in a matter of hours. Kylara gestured for Elias to board first. As he climbed inside, he could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. The shuttle lifted off from the flagship and shot into the depths of space, the stars streaking by like distant pinpricks of light. The moon they were headed to was a barren place, its surface covered in craters and jagged rock formations. The air was thin, and the gravity was low, an environment where the trials could unfold in unexpected ways. When the shuttle finally touched down, Elias stepped out onto the alien soil. The landscape was alien, stark, and unforgiving. There was no sign of life, no plants, no animals, just an empty world that seemed to stretch on forever. In the distance, Elias could see what looked like an ancient structure, its ruins half buried beneath the sand. "This is where your trial begins." Kylara's voice came through the comm system. "Find the temple. Inside, you will face your first challenge. Remember, Elias, only the strong will survive." Elias took a deep breath and set off toward the ruins. The air was thin, but it didn't bother him. His training had prepared him for the harshest conditions. As he walked, he thought about the stories he'd heard. The trials weren't just physical tests. They were psychological, designed to break even the toughest warriors. There were rumors of illusions, traps, and puzzles that tested not only the body but also the mind. As he reached the temple, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The structure, though ancient and weathered by time, stood tall against the vastness of the barren land. It was as if it had been built to withstand centuries of neglect. The entrance loomed before him, a set of massive stone doors etched with strange symbols. The air around him felt charged, and he knew that the trials had truly begun. He stepped inside. The moment he crossed the threshold, the doors slammed shut behind him with a loud crash. Elias turned, but there was no escape. The stone walls of the temple were covered in carvings that seemed to glow with an eerie light. The floor beneath him was uneven, and the temperature dropped. It was as though the temple itself was alive, watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. Suddenly, the voice of Kylara echoed in his ear. "Your first test begins now, Elias. Solve the riddle of the temple or be trapped here forever." A chill ran down Elias's spine as he looked around. In the center of the room was a large stone pedestal, and on it sat an ancient book. The book's pages fluttered as if caught in a wind, but the air was still. Elias walked toward it cautiously. The moment his fingers brushed the pages, words began to appear on the surface of the book, glowing brightly. "To leave, you must choose. A warrior's strength or a leader's wisdom. Which will guide you through the darkness?" Elias read the riddle several times, trying to make sense of it. The challenge was clear. He had to choose between strength and wisdom. But how? The path was unclear and every second counted. His instincts told him to choose strength, to fight his way through, but something told him that would be the wrong choice. In that moment, Elias realized that the trial wasn't about brute force. It was about his ability to think, to strategize, and to understand the true meaning of leadership. The trials were designed to test more than just physical power. They were a test of character, a test of what truly made someone worthy of being by Kylara's side. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, focusing on the words of the riddle. With a steady hand, he reached for the book again. This time he spoke aloud, his voice clear and confident. "Wisdom." The book's pages turned, revealing a hidden passage. The temple's door slowly opened, and Elias knew that he had passed the first trial. But as he walked through the darkened corridor, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The real challenges lay ahead. The dark corridor of the temple stretched on before Elias, the low hum of the ship's engines far behind him. Each step he took echoed in the silence, and the temperature seemed to drop with every passing moment. The flickering lights in the walls cast eerie shadows on the smooth stone floors. As he moved forward, Elias couldn't help but feel that he wasn't alone. There was something else in the temple, something unseen, but powerful. The walls themselves seemed to whisper, urging him onward, as if the very stone itself were testing him. He had passed the first test, but he knew better than to think that was the end. He had only scratched the surface of what the trials held. Every challenge was designed to push him to his limits. The riddle had been a mental test, one that had required him to think beyond physical strength. Now he could sense that the trials were about to take a darker turn. The passageway led him into a large chamber, its ceiling so high it was lost in shadow. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with a single glowing orb resting on top. The orb pulsed with an otherworldly light, its glow soft but constant. As Elias approached it, he felt a strange energy in the air, a tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. For a moment, Elias hesitated. Something about the orb didn't feel right. It seemed too simple, too easy. Was it a trap? His instincts told him to be cautious, but curiosity tugged at him. He reached out to touch the orb, and as soon as his fingers brushed its surface, the room seemed to shimmer, and everything around him faded. He blinked, and suddenly, he was no longer standing in the dark chamber. He was in a lush alien landscape, distant mountains rising against a bright, twin-sunned sky. The air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar flowers, and strange creatures roamed the fields in the distance. But the most shocking sight was the figure standing before him, Princess Kylara. She was no longer the cold, regal leader he had seen aboard the Defender. Here, she was different, more vulnerable, more human. Her expression was one of exhaustion, but there was a fire in her eyes, a fierce determination that Elias hadn't seen before. This is a vision, Elias realized, understanding the situation. A test. Kylara's eyes flickered to him, and for a moment, she didn't seem surprised to see him. Instead, she simply nodded, her gaze steady. "You are here for a reason," she said, her voice carrying a weight that seemed to echo in the strange landscape. "You must understand me, Elias, before the trials are over." Elias stepped forward, his boots crunching on the alien ground. "Understand you? What do you mean?" The princess looked away, her hands clasped in front of her. "The trials are not just about you. They are about us, about me, and about what I am forced to do." Elias tilted his head in confusion. "I don't understand. What do you mean, forced?" Kylara's eyes turned to him again, this time with something different. Guilt? Regret? "I am not the ruler I seem to be, Elias. My family, my people, they have bound me to this fate. The trials were not meant to choose someone worthy. They were meant to find someone who could serve." Elias took a step closer, his voice steady, but filled with curiosity. "Serve who?" "Serve me," Kylara answered, her voice growing soft. "I was born into a role I did not choose. The Varian Empire expects me to take a mate, someone who will strengthen my bloodline. But the truth is, I do not want this. I never have. I wanted to be free." Elias's heart raced. He had always known Kylara was powerful, but he had never imagined this side of her. She wasn't just a ruler. She was a prisoner of her own empire, trapped by expectations she had never chosen. Her strength, it seemed, came not only from her position but from her desire to break free. I don't understand. Why choose me?" Elias asked. "What makes me different from the others?" Kylara paused, her eyes locked on his. "Because you are not like the others. You are different. You are human." Elias frowned. "What does that mean?" "Humans are unpredictable. You think differently than we do. You act differently. You are not bound by centuries of tradition. You are free, in a way that no one here can understand. And that is why I need you. I need you to help me escape this destiny, to help me make my own choices." Elias took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling over him. He had entered these trials expecting to prove his strength, to fight for his honor and the future of humanity. But now, he realized that this was more than just a contest of strength. This was a chance to help someone, a princess, a prisoner, find the freedom she longed for. Before he could respond, the vision flickered, and the landscape around him began to dissolve. The lush fields, the twin suns, and the distant mountains vanished, replaced by the cold stone walls of the temple. Elias stood once more in the chamber, his hand still hovering near the glowing orb. But the room felt different now. It no longer felt like a trap. Instead, it felt like a decision had been made, a choice that would shape the future for both him and Kylara. The orb in front of him pulsed one last time, then dimmed. A soft voice echoed in his mind. You have passed the test of the heart. The trials are not just about strength. They are about understanding. The path ahead is yours to choose, Elias. But remember, your choices will determine the fate of more than just one world. Elias stepped back from the orb, the weight of the vision still fresh in his mind. He had learned something important about Kylara. She was not just the princess of the Varian Empire. She was a leader torn between the expectations of her people and her own desires for freedom. As the door to the chamber opened, Elias turned to face the next challenge, his mind clearer than before. He had come here to prove his worth, but now he knew his role was bigger than that. He wasn't just fighting for his own future. He was fighting for Kylara's, and perhaps even the future of both their worlds. Kylara had trusted him with her secret, but there was much more to come. The trials were far from over, and the choices he made in the coming days would determine the fate of not just himself, but also the princess he had come to understand in a way no one else had. Elias stood on the edge of the temple ruins, his thoughts racing. The words of Princess Kylara echoed in his mind, leaving him with more questions than answers. He had entered these trials seeking to prove his strength, but now he found himself caught in a web of political intrigue and personal struggles far deeper than he had anticipated. The trials were not only about testing his physical and mental limits, they were about understanding the burdens that came with leadership and the choices that would shape the fate of both the Varian Empire and humanity. The more Elias learned about Kylara, the more he realized how much her freedom, her very future, was tied to the decisions they would make together. And yet, despite the trust she had shown him, Elias knew that the path ahead would not be simple. There were forces at play, both within and outside the Varian Empire, that would stop at nothing to prevent Kylara from breaking free. As Elias moved through the temple's inner halls, he could feel the weight of those forces closing in. He had passed the first few trials, but now it was clear that the real challenge was not the tests themselves, but the people who watched from the shadows. The princess had trusted him, but there were others in her court who did not, and they would not be so easily swayed by his determination. The door to the next chamber creaked open and Elias stepped inside. The room was smaller than the others, with walls lined by ancient carvings that seemed to shift as he moved. In the center of the room was a stone table, upon which lay an array of strange, shimmering objects. The air was thick with an almost electric energy, and Elias could sense that this trial would be unlike the others. As he approached the table, the voice of Kylara came through the comms system once more. This is the trial of alliances, Elias. You will have to make a choice, one that will test your ability to trust and to lead. The power of your decision will determine not just your success in the trials, but your place in the future of this empire. Elias's heart beat faster. The trial of alliances. He had no idea what that meant, but he knew that whatever came next, it would test his loyalty, his resolve, and his ability to navigate the complex web of politics that had ensnared Kylara. He glanced at the objects on the table, each one glowing with an ethereal light. His instincts told him not to trust them, but his training as a warrior had taught him to face challenges head-on. He reached for the nearest object, a small crystal that shimmered with a deep blue light. As his fingers made contact, the crystal pulsed and cracked open, revealing a holographic image. It was a map of the Varian Empire, but it was not the map Kylara had shown him before. This one was different. It was marked with symbols Elias did not recognize, and there were lines drawn across it marking certain territories in bold red. Before he could process what he was seeing, the map flickered and changed. Another image appeared, this time of a man in a Varian military uniform. His face was stern, his eyes cold and calculating. Elias recognized him immediately. It was General Kale, one of Kylara's most trusted commanders, and one of the most powerful figures in the Varian Empire. Kale's voice filled the chamber, echoing off the walls. Warrior Elias, I have been watching your progress in the trials. You are a formidable opponent, but you are also a pawn in a game much bigger than you realize. If you truly wish to protect Kylara and the future of the Varian Empire, you must choose a side. Elias's pulse quickened. Upon? This wasn't just about surviving the trials anymore. This was about a battle for power, one in which Kylara's fate was being decided by the very people she had trusted. Kale's voice continued, his tone smooth and convincing. If you help me, Elias, the Varian Empire will rise to new heights. Kylara is a liability. She is weak, unfit to rule. The Empire needs strength, and I can provide that strength. Together we can reshape the galaxy. But if you side with her, you will fall, just as she will. The image of Kale flickered and disappeared, leaving only the shimmering map in front of Elias. He stood there for a moment, his mind racing. This was it, the moment of choice. Elias had never been one to follow orders blindly. He had been raised to think for himself, to fight for what was right. But Kale's words weighed heavily on him. The general was powerful, and his influence could bring about change in the galaxy. But Elias knew that if he sided with Kale, it would be a betrayal of everything Kylara had trusted him with. He turned from the table, his decision clear. He would not be manipulated by Kale. He would not allow Kylara's fate to be determined by someone who cared only for power. The Empire needed change, but it needed Kylara's vision, not Kale's. As Elias stepped back, the chamber doors opened, revealing Kylara standing in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable, but Elias could see the faint flicker of concern in her eyes. You passed the trial, she said quietly, but there is more to come. You were right to choose the path of trust, Elias. I knew you would not betray me. Elias met her gaze, his resolve hardening. I made the right choice, Kylara. But we need to act fast. Kale is dangerous, and he has many allies. He won't stop until he has the Empire under his control. Kylara nodded, her expression growing more serious. I know, and that is why you are here. The trials are not just for me. They are for us both. We must act together, Elias. We must fight not just for the future of the Varian Empire, but for the future of both our peoples. Elias stepped forward, his voice filled with determination. Then let's do it, together. The two of them stood there side by side, the weight of their decision settling over them. The path ahead was uncertain, but they were no longer just two individuals caught in the game of politics and power. They were allies, partners, and their fight was just beginning. But as Elias turned to leave the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Kale's words echoed in his mind, and he knew that this was far from over. The true battle was only just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. The tension in the air was thick as Elias and Kylara stood side by side, their decision made. The trials had tested them both in ways they hadn't anticipated, and now, they were ready to face the greatest challenge yet, defeating General Kale and ensuring that Kylara's vision for the Varian Empire would survive. Elias couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. The path had been long and filled with uncertainty, but now it was clear. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Kylara's freedom, for the future of both the Varian and human peoples. The stakes had never been higher. We cannot waste any time, Kylara said, her voice steady yet filled with an underlying urgency. Kale will make his move soon. His forces are growing stronger by the hour, and if we don't act now, we'll lose everything. Elias nodded, his mind racing. The general had proven himself a master of manipulation, using the trials to test not just his physical strength, but his ability to navigate the complex world of Varian politics. Kale had used his power to turn allies into enemies and had set the stage for a brutal takeover of the Varian Empire. But Kylara was determined to stop him. The two of them had spent the last few days gathering their forces, reaching out to loyalists within the Empire who were willing to stand with Kylara. Many of them were soldiers, warriors who had fought beside her in the past and knew the true strength of her leadership. They had seen Kylara's heart, her vision for a more just and free empire, and they had chosen to follow her into battle. Now, as the sun set over the Varian capital, they were ready. The plan was simple yet dangerous. Elias would infiltrate Kale's stronghold, an ancient fortress hidden deep in the mountains, and sabotage his communications. Meanwhile, Kylara would rally the remaining loyalist forces, preparing them for the final confrontation. It was a risky plan, but it was their only chance. Elias and Kylara stood on the balcony of the royal palace overlooking the city below. The streets were bustling with activity, but Elias could feel the tension in the air. The people knew that something was coming, but they didn't know what. There was an unease that hung over the city like a storm waiting to break. "I never imagined it would come to this," Kylara said, her voice soft as she gazed out at the horizon. "The Empire, my people. I wanted to rule with compassion, but sometimes compassion isn't enough. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right." Elias turned to her, his expression filled with understanding. "I know, I've seen it. But you're not alone in this. You don't have to carry this burden on your own." Kylara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I don't know what I would do without you, Elias. You've shown me that there is another way. I never believed I could be free, but now I think I can see a future where we can both be free. Together." Elias's heart skipped a beat at her words. There was something powerful in her gaze, something that spoke of trust, of shared hope. The bond between them had deepened over the course of the trials, but this was something more. It was a promise, a commitment to fight for each other no matter the cost. "We will fight for that future," Elias said, his voice firm. "We will fight for freedom, for peace, and no matter what happens, we will make sure that Kale's vision doesn't take over. Not now, not ever." Kylara smiled, a hint of warmth in her eyes. "I believe in you, Elias, and I believe in us." The moment was brief, but it gave Elias the strength he needed to move forward. He knew that this battle wouldn't be easy, but with Kylara by his side and the Loyalists behind them, they stood a chance. They had come too far to turn back now. As night fell, the two of them made their way to the palace's hidden command center, where the final preparations were underway. The Loyalist forces had been gathered, ready to strike at the heart of Kale's empire. Kylara stood at the head of the room, addressing the officers and soldiers who had pledged their allegiance to her. "We have one chance to defeat Kale," she said, her voice strong and confident. "We have to move quickly and strike when he least expects it. We know his weakness now. He believes that his power is absolute. But he is wrong. We are the future of the Varian Empire, and we will show him that." The room erupted in applause, and Elias could see the fire in their eyes. They were ready. And with that, the plan was set into motion. Elias and a small group of soldiers prepared to infiltrate Kale's fortress. They would move quickly and quietly, avoiding detection at all costs. The goal was to disable Kale's communication systems, cutting off his ability to coordinate his forces. Without that, his empire would crumble. As they traveled through the dense forests and rugged mountains, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as they approached the fortress, hidden among the jagged peaks. The walls were thick and reinforced, but Elias had trained for moments like this. He knew how to move silently, how to strike when the enemy least expected it. They reached the outer walls of the fortress just as dawn was breaking. The first light of morning cast long shadows across the stone, and Elias signaled for the team to move into position. They climbed the walls using ropes and grappling hooks to scale the heights with practiced ease. Inside the fortress, the silence was deafening. They moved through the halls like ghosts, careful not to alert the guards. Elias's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. He had trained for this moment, and he wouldn't fail now. At last, they reached the control room where Kyle's communication systems were housed. The guards were few, but they were well trained. With a swift, silent strike, Elias and his team took them down, incapacitating them without a sound. They quickly set to work, planting explosives to disable the system and render Kale's forces blind to their movements. Just as they finished, Elias's comm device buzzed. It was Kylara. "We're ready," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "It's time." With a final glance at his team, Elias activated the explosives. The sound of the blast echoed through the fortress, and the lights flickered as the communication systems went dark. The battle for the Varian Empire had begun.